The van door slammed shut, and I stood alone, surrounded by cobblestone, silence, and vines. No map. No phone signal. No husband. Just a handwritten note on the bench that read, "Don't take it so seriously, Belle." They thought it was funny. Daniel and his friends. A joke, to leave me behind in the smallest village I had ever seen, population barely enough to fill a wine bar. I watched the van disappear in a trail of laughter and dust. I didn't wave, there was no punchline, no return. Just the weight of my luggage and a sinking feeling that this wasn't a prank. It was a message. And the message was clear: you don't matter here. Your baggage. The street was silent. A single cafe was still open, wooden chairs stacked, lights dimmed. I walked toward it like I was walking into a memory that didn't belong to me. No one offered help. No one knew what had just happened. I ordered espresso in broken Italian, hands trembling. The barista raised an eyebrow, then handed me the cup without a word. I drank it slowly, like it might translate the moment into something survivable. He laughed before they left. Said, "It's just for an hour. You'll catch up." But I knew that voice. I knew that smirk. It wasn't mischief. It was cruelty dressed in sarcasm. And they all played along. My suitcase had my clothes, but not my dignity. That was still sitting in the back of that van, next to Daniel's empty promise to be good this time. I stared at the hills beyond the square. And I knew, this was the turning point he never expected. They thought I'd cry, beg, call for help. That I'd fold like always. Swallow the insult with practiced grace. But something snapped in me, quietly, like the click of a lock turning. I asked the cafe owner, "Is there a room nearby?" She called someone named Luciana. A few minutes later, a woman with silver hair and calm eyes walked me across the square. No questions. Just keys. And a room facing the vineyard. Inside, I sat on the edge of the bed. My wedding ring caught the lamplight. I took it off. Set it on the nightstand. Not as revenge. Not yet. Just to remember how light my hand felt without it. I didn't call him. Not that night. Not the next morning. Let him wonder if I was chasing them. Let him feel, for once, what distance does to someone who used to care. The sunrise was cruelly beautiful. The kind of view people post online with captions about gratitude and fresh starts. I didn't post. I didn't speak. I just stood at the window and let the silence dress me, because that's the thing about being left behind. It stops being punishment when you realize you were already alone. The van didn't abandon me. It freed me. And I was finally somewhere he couldn't rewrite the story first. We met in a bookstore, between travel guides and poetry. He asked if I believed in fate, then bought me coffee without asking. I thought it was bold. He called me Belle on the second sentence. I didn't correct him. He talked like life was a film he directed, fast cuts, charming edits, no space for silence. I listened, because I liked the way he filled a room. He said I slowed him down in the best way. I didn't realize he meant that as a burden. We got married in spring. He wore a navy suit I picked. I wore lace, not white. He laughed during the vows, said, "You're too serious, Belle." I smiled through it. My father's hand tightened around mine. After our honeymoon was Italy, but rushed. He had meetings even then. He promised we'd come back one day when the business calms down. 9 years later, we finally did. And he left me on a stone bench. In the beginning, he said he admired me, my work, my mind, my stillness. But soon, he mocked it. "Don't be so academic. Do you always have to analyze everything?" I laughed it off. Then swallowed it down. He built his wine business on my translations. I edited every label, crafted every pitch. Wrote emails while nursing migraines. He once said, "She's not the face of the brand, but she's the reason it works." Then told his board I was just his wife. They nodded. Every trip we planned became a seminar. Every dinner turned into a network meeting. He said I was more of a partner than a wife. I wanted to be both. He wanted applause. And I became the quiet between his claps. His friends called me the serious one. Always with a grin. Always half joking. Marco once said, "You married her for the brains, but not for the party." Daniel laughed. I excused myself. He forgot our anniversary twice. Said dates weren't his love language. But he never forgot his clients' birthdays. Or Brielle's promotion party. He said, "You don't make things easy, Belle." But I made the mortgage work. I made his name shine. When my mother died, he gave a speech about grief at the funeral. Said I was handling it beautifully. But he never held me at night. Only patted my shoulder like sorrow was a performance he'd already reviewed. He traveled often. Came back with gifts I never asked for. Perfumes I didn't wear. Scarves still in plastic. I wanted presents, not things. He gave me receipts. And a fading version of himself. I stopped bringing up my writing. He said it was a hobby, even though I had published twice. At dinner, he talked over me. Corrected details I lived. Once, he said, she's shy, right in front of me. We came to Italy with 4 couples. I thought it'd be a reset. He said it'd be fun. He meant for him. I brought books. He brought jokes. I packed us both. He unpacked me. Luciana asked how long we'd been married. I said, too long to feel this invisible. She didn't blink. Just handed me tea. With honey. And a silence that didn't hurt. That's the thing about marriage. You think the cracks mean you should patch. But sometimes, they're invitations. To walk out. To wake up. To start again, this time, without waiting for someone else's map. He rolled his eyes when I asked about the itinerary. Let it go, Belle. It's not a conference. But I knew what he meant. No structure. No space for me to suggest anything. He made all the bookings. Told me to just follow. He sat at dinner telling stories, ones I was part of. But in his version, I was always the worried one, the killjoy, the background. I laughed. Softly. For them. He stopped touching me in public. Not even a hand on the back. But he touched the waiter's arm, gestured with confidence, ordered wine in fluent arrogance. I sat next to him. And felt like luggage. At the villa, I got the smallest room. He said it was more your vibe. Quiet, garden view, far from the terrace. Where they laughed until 2 a.m. I once asked if he'd come lie with me. He said, I'll be there soon. He never came. He joked that I was too cultured to enjoy their games. Said I think too much for vacation. When I offered to plan a walking tour, he said, we're not retired, Belle. They all laughed. I excused myself. Again, Marco brought up an old fight at the pool. Daniel told them my silent treatments were legendary. They called me the Ice Queen. I smiled. Tight. My drink went warm in my hand while they clinked glasses. He forgot I was allergic to shellfish. Ordered the risotto anyway. Said, oh, right, like I was exaggerating. I ate bread. He shared his plate with Eli's girlfriend. Said she had a better palate. I stopped being hungry. They planned a vineyard hike. I offered to drive. Daniel said, you'll slow us down. They left without telling me the time. I sat in the courtyard for 2 hours. Then walked the trail alone. They never asked where I'd been. He stopped sharing room keys. Said it was more convenient that way. When I got locked out, Luciana opened the door. I stood in the hallway barefoot, holding a paperback and the feeling of not belonging. He called my silence mood swings. Said, she gets like this. When she doesn't feel important. They laughed again. I was 3 feet away. I watched him throw his arm over Marco's shoulder. And felt more married to the idea of loyalty than to the man himself. He asked me not to wear heels, said I'd look like I was trying too hard. Then complimented Eli's girlfriend's shoes. Elegant, but effortless, he said. I stood beside her, in flats, and learned what erasure feels like. He let me walk behind. Always. Even in narrow streets. I was the last in line, the one who took the photo but never appeared in any. The invisible chronicler. He once turned to me and said, you could be more fun if you wanted. Like joy was a costume I refused to wear. But joy had long stopped visiting the version of me he allowed to exist. And I realized, I was grieving someone still alive. The night before they left me, he asked if I remembered how to be spontaneous. I asked if he remembered how to be kind. He scoffed. Said, you're always playing victim. But that night, I made a copy of his laugh, because deep down, even before the bench, I already knew this wasn't just vacation cruelty. It was rehearsal. And they'd been practicing how to leave me behind for years. The morning light seeped through my shutters, but he didn't knock. Not even once. My suitcase sagged hard, like it held years of unnoticed effort. I realized then this wasn't a cruel joke. It was a reveal. I walked to the piazza. Villagers greeted me in broken English. Curious eyes. But no Daniel. No Marco. No Eli. Just murmurs about the outsider with the ring. I went to the cafe. Sat where I'd ordered espresso. The barista asked softly, abandoned? I didn't answer. I just nodded, because yes. That single word carried every betrayal there. Van left skid marks where love should have been parked. I traced my finger on the stone bench, where, don't take it so seriously, Belle, was scrawled so casually. The laughter echoed in my mind like a cruel memory. I called Daniel's phone. It rang. It went to voicemail. Again. 3 times. Each beep felt heavy. Like closure. Summoned but muted. I texted Marco, when do you pick me up? Read receipts. Then, silence again. I stared at the dots, the promise of a reply that never came. I rummaged through my bag. Found the translation contract he signed. All my work. All my hours. Paid into his brand. Not mine. I flipped through every page, proof I was real. And removed all his notes. I asked Luciana if there was a phone. She led me to a landline. I dialed my parents. They didn't know. Why would they? He'd spoken in laughter. They stood in trust that I told them I was alone in Italy. Foodless. Ringless. Docile no more. I heard my mother cry. For what she couldn't fix. And I let her back in the room. I tore the note off the bench. Ran warm water over it until ink bled. Then dried it carefully, like an artifact. Something to remember. I traced the words later. In the guest book Luciana kept. Left a line of my own, abandoned for laughter. Not a question. A statement. The ink fell like a verdict. They were nowhere to be found. No contact. No apology. Just the dust trail of men who thought I'd chase. The illusion of fun. I stopped crying. Not because I was okay. Because the dry ache was louder than tears could explain. So I practiced silence instead. Held it like a shield. I unpacked my books. Lined them neat. Opened one at the chapter called Woman Who Rewrites. Because I realized this story still had pages. I sat and read. That night, I didn't wait. I walked down to Luciana's. She offered dinner. No questions. No pity. Just olive oil and sustenance for a wounded dignity. I wrote one text. To Daniel, Marco, Eli, I'm not here for the punchline. I'm staying for the rest of the story. Sent. And did not press send again. Because the silence that followed was mine to keep. I didn't leave the room for 2 days. The shutters stayed closed. I learned the rhythm of the village bells, but not because I wanted to. Because they marked my solitude like a clock that forgot joy and only remembered absence. My hair tangled. I didn't unpack the last dress. The one I wore to dinner before he left me. It still smelled like rosemary and mockery. I couldn't bring myself to fold it. Folding felt like forgiveness. I wasn't ready. Luciana knocked once a day. Never entered. Just left food outside. Pasta, olives, warm bread. I let some go cold. Because hunger felt appropriate. At least it was mine. I stared at my ring for hours. Slid it on. Took it off. Held it like it could confess something. But metal stays silent. Like him. Like every dinner we shared and half conversations. I tried to call again. Just to hear his voice. But he'd blocked me. Blocked me. As if I had embarrassed him. As if being left behind required further punishment. I scrolled our photos. Tried. To find moments I looked genuinely loved. Found smiles. But not safety. Found arms around me. But never shoulders turned toward me. I didn't cry. I catalogued. I sent one email to my department head. Extended leave. No return date yet. She replied in 5 minutes, take all the time you need. No one ever told me that in marriage. It was always me adjusting. Always me condensing. On the 3rd night, I lit a candle in the bathroom. Stared at myself in the mirror. No makeup. No armor. And whispered, you're not invisible. They're just blind. I remembered my first class lecture. How I stood shaking but spoke anyway. How students leaned in. How my words filled a room without needing a man to translate their worth. I took a notebook from my bag. The same one I packed for quotes. But this time, I wrote my own. First line, he left me on a bench. I stood up. I underlined it. Twice. The village began to feel different. Not like exile, but like retreat. A space where no one knew me well enough to reduce me. No mirrors built from other people's words. Just space. And time. I stopped waiting. For his apology. For their messages. For a rescue that would never come. And in that quiet, I discovered a voice not made for begging. I wrote him one last message. Never sent it. Just sealed it in my journal. It said, you didn't break me. You just made it easier to stop explaining my worth. That night, I opened the window. Let the wind move through the room. Fresh, unfiltered. Like my grief. It didn't erase the pain. But it carried it. And that was enough, because some endings don't need thunder. They just need the absence of people who never deserved to stay. And in that absence, I began again. Still alone, but never smaller. I found the contract in my inbox. Still forwarded to my email from his business account. He never revoked access. Not because he trusted me, because he forgot I existed there. Forgot that the woman who built his brand could also dismantle it. Was the licensing deal. His largest yet. My translations, my formatting, my design. Still credited as editor, Isabelle Hart. He never removed my name. He just erased my presence in person. But the paper remembered. I opened the folder marked Final Decks. Slide 6 still had my watermark. Slide 12 quoted one of my articles. He used my voice to sell his product. To investors. To people who would never know he left me on a bench. Luciana walked in as I was reviewing it. I looked up. Said, he made millions off words I wrote. She said nothing. Then handed me her laptop. Wi-Fi password on a napkin. A gesture of trust. I emailed a copy of the presentation to the new investor I recognized, a woman I once translated for at a global summit. Subject, a quiet correction. No accusations. Just facts. With timestamps. I highlighted my name. Marked which sections I'd authored. Attached my original drafts. And added, this is not legal action. This is visibility. I didn't sign with anger. Just my name, without his. She replied in an hour. Said, I had no idea. Thank you. And then, I'll take it from here. That sentence felt like air. Like breath returning. Like proof. I sent one more email, to my former colleague in journalism. Titled, An Italian Interruption. It wasn't gossip. It was observation. A narrative of abandonment, crafted with elegance. They wanted a feature. I said yes. With conditions. No names. No faces. Just truth. Just the architecture of betrayal. That week, the article went live. Titled, When the Bench Was the Beginning. It trended in silence. Shared in circles he thought he controlled. He read it, I know, because he tried to call. I didn't answer. I contacted a publisher I once interned with. Offered a collection of essays. Theme, Unclaimed Wives. They replied within 2 days. Said the market needed voices like mine. I wasn't just a name now. I was an author. In Luciana's living room, I printed every page. Bound it with thread. Old-fashioned, meticulous. Because rebuilding doesn't rush. It crafts. It breathes. And it waits for no man. He finally emailed. Subject, can we talk? I replied, no. But you may listen. Attached was a voice memo. My words. Read aloud. Professionally. He'd hear them in the same tone he once silenced. Only this time, they weren't asking for space. They were filling it. Completely. Unapologetically. And in that quiet moment, after emails, contracts, and pages, I realized, I never needed to confront him. I just needed to correct the record. And step away before the applause. The investors pulled out quietly. No press. No drama. Just cancelled meetings and muted calls. His launch was postponed for restructuring. The brand he built on my words now echoed without voice. Only glass and empty chairs. I mailed him one thing. A printed copy of the article, the one about the bench. No signature. No note. Just a highlight over the sentence, she was left behind, but carried the narrative. That was enough. He responded with silence. Then with denial. Then with offers, let's go home. We'll fix this. But I was already home. Not in geography. In self. I booked a speaking tour. 3 cities. Each centered on reclaiming voice after erasure. At the first event, a woman in the crowd stood and said, thank you for writing what I couldn't say. I cried, quietly, for both of us. My final speech was in Florence. The room was full of strangers who knew my story without needing my last name. I wore the same dress I brought for his dinner. This time, I owned it. And every step into that spotlight. After the talk, a man approached. He said, your husband, he's ruined online. I nodded. Doesn't that feel good? He asked. I smiled, but not cruelly. No, I said. It feels done. Luciana hosted a dinner in my honor. Handwritten menus. One glass set aside at every seat, because she said, some absences deserve a place. Mine was filled. His was not. And no one asked why. He came to Italy. Weeks later. Asked Luciana where I was. She said, she's not looking for you. He left a letter. I didn't open it. I burned it in the vineyard. The publisher flew in for a photo. Held my book with both hands. I held mine with pride. The cover said, the bench was just the beginning. His face was nowhere. But every woman saw themselves in the space he left. At the airport, I saw Brielle. Alone. Waiting near the gate. Our eyes met. She looked away first. Because guilt doesn't survive where dignity has already moved on. I boarded without hesitation. Seat by the window. One bag. No ring. No rage. Just a ticket with my name printed, first and only. The flight attendant offered champagne. I declined. Asked for water. Because celebration isn't loud for me. It's stillness. It's breath. It's boarding without looking back. The day his company folded, I got the notification on LinkedIn. He updated his title, consultant. Rebuilding. I didn't click. He was finally doing what I did alone. But without my grace. I framed the bench photo. It hangs near my desk. A reminder. That abandonment was never the ending. It was the proof that leaving me behind was the last thing he controlled. And when women ask me what I did to get back at him, I say, I kept walking. I kept writing. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I just removed myself from a story that never deserved my voice. My passport pages are fuller now. Not with escapes, but with choices. Each stamp a step away from the version of me that waited for permission to be seen. I live in Lisbon now. Near the water. A flat with blue tiles and quiet mornings. No one there calls me too serious. They call me writer. They call me professor. They call me enough. I built a routine I don't apologize for. Mornings with espresso and ink. Afternoons teaching young women how to write without shrinking. Evenings with books, candles, and silence that soothes instead of punishes. My ring sits in a drawer, wrapped in the note from the bench. I didn't sell it. I didn't throw it out. Because even a symbol of betrayal can become a trophy when you outgrow its meaning. My students ask about love. I tell them, love is never a test of endurance. It's not about staying through humiliation. It's not about earning respect. It's about being safe while being fully seen. I don't tell them the whole story. Not always. But they sense it. In the way I pause before saying, once I was left on a bench, they lean in. And they know how it ends. My parents visited. Last spring. My father cried at dinner. Said, I'm sorry we didn't see sooner. I squeezed his hand. Told him, I didn't either. But now I see everything. And we toasted with quiet pride. I write columns now. Monthly. About presence. About silence. About how the absence of cruelty is not love, it's the beginning of healing. The bench in the photo, I had it painted. It hangs in my living room. No title. No capstan. Just wood and memory. A relic of my beginning. Sometimes he still emails. Never angry. Just nostalgic. I never open them. I don't need to see his regrets. I already own the lesson. And I live it. Brielle messaged once. Said she didn't know the full story. I replied with one sentence, you didn't ask. She didn't respond. I didn't wait. I'd waited enough. When the book won an award, I didn't tell anyone. Just stood alone in my apartment and whispered, I did this. Not for applause, but for alignment. I take walks at sunset now. Without checking my phone. Without rushing to make space for someone else. Each step is a decision not to shrink. Not to beg. Not to explain. Luciana visits once a year. Brings wine. We sit on my balcony and laugh. Sometimes about him. Mostly. About everything else. She calls me la donna del silenzio. The woman of silence, and she's right. Because in the end, my loudest revenge was how softly I rebuilt. How fully I disappeared, from his world, and into my own.